Hey, Loopline here. In this video I want to talk about how to safely scrape Google with proxies. Now, some people use private proxies or shared proxies, some people use public proxies, and there's not a wrong answer here. You can do whatever works for you. So I want to talk about all of them in this particular video. So if we want to use private proxies, then basically the idea is we're going to depend on the reliability of a private proxy and it being very fast and that sort of thing. So we got to take it slow enough that Google doesn't ban those IPs. So there's a ratio that you can use as a general rule, and Google changes it. So if you go back and watch one of my old videos on this, from a couple of years ago, I said that you could use a private proxy ratio of 1 to 5, which was true at that time, or maybe 1 to 10. So that means for every 5 private proxies you have, you could use 1 connection. So if I had 15 private proxies, I could use 3 connections to scrape Google. Now it's more like 1 connection for every 30 to 50 proxies that you have for regular keyword scraping. And then if I want to use advanced operators, it's more like 1 proxy for every 50 to 80 proxies that I have or more. Now, it does vary based on a lot of things. So for instance, if you happen to get proxies that have been banned a lot in the past, then they're probably going to get banned quicker and stay banned for longer, which means you're going to have to slow down even more. So you might have to use 1 connection for every 100 proxies. If you are going to use really advanced queries, like 2 or 3 advanced operators plus something else in there, for example, like the date range, or even just using the date range operator, seems to use more processor power for Google most likely, so they then ban IPs even faster. So it just varies based on what you're doing, the results that you're going to get. So you're going to have to do some testing. Different proxies are going to produce different results along with different queries, and I do have a video that I'll link to in the description that talks about how there are different kinds of IP bans. So you might not be blocked for basic keyword search, but you might be blocked for using an advanced operator, or maybe you're blocked for one Google service like the malware and phishing add-on or mobile site tester add-on for those services, but you're not blocked for keyword scraping. So all of those have different bans. And each one is unique, so you kind of got to do a little testing. Now let's say that I want to do some scraping and I only have 10 proxies. Well, then you can use the detailed harvester. So let's talk about the detailed harvester and the custom harvester and delays. So if I'm going to use the custom harvester, I can do this, go to settings, connections, timeouts, and other settings, and then I have my harvester settings here, and I can change my connections appropriately based on what I need to do. So let's say I was doing basic keyword searches and I had 100 proxies, so I'm going to go ahead and set this to 2 connections just to be safe, and then that's slow enough that it rotates through the proxies slow enough that Google generally is not going to ban them, or at least not most of them. A couple might get banned because it's not a perfect rotation, it's random. So as that rotates through, generally you could set that up and scrape for days or weeks, or sometimes I've left stuff run for nearly a month just on one scraping run. So that's how I can use custom harvester if I have a lot of them. But if I only have, like, say 10 proxies or 5 proxies, I can use detailed harvester. And in the detailed harvester, when we go in here, basically we have the option to use a delay down here in seconds. So if I had 10 proxies, maybe I want to set it to a delay of like 8 seconds, and I'm picking numbers here. You're going to have to do some experimentation. Automatically the detailed harvester is single threaded, because if you need to use a delay, then there's no point in really using more than 1 connection. So all you could do is go back to the custom harvester and just turn the connections up. If you had hundreds of proxies and you want to use a delay, it doesn't make sense. So if I use the detailed harvester, I get 1 connection, and let's say maybe 8. If I had like 5 proxies, maybe I want something more like 15. Now, if I'm going into advanced operators and I have like 10 proxies, then I might need 15-second delay just to start out with, or I might need more. I talked to one person, and because of the query they were using, they had 100 proxies and they were using a 5-minute delay. So 5 times 60 seconds, like 300 in here is what they were using, and that worked. And so one query every 5 minutes, that may seem slow, but at the end of the day, you don't have to run around hunting up private proxies. And with a super advanced query like that, getting a hold of public proxies is what I meant to say. You don't have to run around hunting up up public proxies, and getting a hold of enough proxies that are public that are going to work for that anyways would be very slim, and you could easily spend hours and hours and hours that could add up to days or even weeks of work trying to find public proxies to get this, when you could just buy 100 proxies and stick it on a 5-minute delay. And yeah, it might take 4 days to get done with your list of keywords in his case, but it's still simpler and easier because you just set it up and walk away, and it just works. Now, there's options in these for public proxies, which we'll talk about just a second, along with server proxies and lots of other things. But specifically speaking, if you're using private proxies or shared proxies, you want to use a ratio that looks something like, for every 30 to 50 proxies, so I'm just going to say for every 50 proxies, for instance, I'm going to use 1 connection. So obviously if I had 300 proxies that are private, I could obviously use 6 connections. That's for basic keyword search, and then if I want to go advanced operators, maybe 300 proxies gets me 3 connections, or maybe even 2, depending on the query itself. Basically, you can do some testing, and so if I do some testing and my proxies get banned, then I go with lower connections. If I'm using the delay and I set a delay of 5 seconds and my proxies get banned, maybe I'm going to up that delay to 10 seconds. But let's say I come in with 30 proxies and set a delay of 10 seconds to be safe, and everything's going great and I'm not getting banned, maybe then I want to take this down to 7 seconds and try a run of scraping with that. So basically the idea is to find the sweet spot where you can go as fast as possible but still not get blocked. And to some level, dialing it back and having a little bit of a buffer in there, maybe I could get away with 6 seconds, say, but I'm going to go 7 just because what happens if a proxy gets blocked, or what happens if Google tightens things down, and they will. Obviously, in the past couple years since I made the last video, they ban things a lot faster now, a lot faster, like 5 to 10 times as fast as they did before, so we have to slow it down that much. Now, what happens when IPv6 IPs come out and they're all over the place? Maybe then the rules will change. So the point is that this is the rule today, and it happens to be February of 2016, so by the time March comes around, Google could have changed it, or by the time the end of 2016 comes around, it could have changed. So you're going to have to do testing, but you can use the same concept. The same concept I've been using myself for years and telling people to use for years is that ultimately there is a speed level where you can slow it down enough that you're not going to get banned, and you just have to find that sweet spot either by adding more proxies or adding less connections or even a delay to slow it down enough that you get what you want to get without getting banned. And that is the general concept. Now, let's say I'm done with private proxies and I want to do some public proxies. Now, obviously you can load those in and use the custom harvester. It doesn't make sense if I have 400 Google Pass public proxies to use 8 connections on them, or use the detailed harvester and use a delay or anything like that, because if I do nothing out of 400 proxies, every single one of them will get banned, because Google proxies are the most sought after proxies because they're the most popular. So if I do nothing, that doesn't make sense. Now, if I set 400 proxies at 1,000 connections, then I'm going to get them banned in like a minute. So that doesn't make sense either. So I would do something conservative. Maybe for every 100 Google Pass public proxies, I'd do something like 5 connections. So if it was private proxies, I'd do 1 or 2. Maybe I'll do 5 or maybe even 10 with public proxies, because I want to be able to get a decent amount out of them, because if I do nothing, they're going to get banned by somebody else. But I also don't want to ban them instantaneously and get almost nothing out of them. So I'm going to try to, again, find that sweet spot where I can go as fast as possible to get as much out of them as I can before they get blocked, because they're going to get blocked no matter what. You can cycle through hundreds or thousands of Google proxies a day, and they will all get blocked or go offline if you do nothing. So you can do different things as far as getting your public proxies. I have another video on setting up a separate instance of Scrapebox with the automator to always be harvesting and testing proxies. And when you test proxies, you can have it auto-save to file and have the harvester auto-pull in from file every so often. I'm not going to really cover all of that in this video, because you can go see it in the other videos, which again I'll link to here in the description here on YouTube. But the concept here is to teach an idea and a concept that you can use public proxies and private proxies to scrape and get what you need. Because I constantly have people ask me, well, my proxies are always blocked, and the way that you know that is when you're harvesting here in the errors column, the errors right here will just increase, and when the errors just increase, it could be that a proxy was bad if it's a public proxy, or it could be something else, and you can look in your error log, which we'll look at in a second, to see that for sure. But as a general rule, if you see this error count column going up, it just means your IPs are banned. So let me pull up the error log real quick so you know what I'm talking about. So in your main Scrapebox folder, you are going to have a folder called error log, and then you're going to have a harvester error log. And so you'll be able to see, I don't have anything in here because I don't have any errors since the last time I cleared this out, but you'll see the errors listed. And they can help you troubleshoot. If you see stuff like 404 or 500, that's obviously not coming from Google, because Google will never return that. They'll never return a 403. All those errors are to do with your proxies or a firewall or something else blocking. So these can be helpful. But as a general rule, if you see that error count column going up, it's because of blocked IPs. And then you just need to slow things down. And in the detailed harvester, we don't have an actual error column, but you can see the status. It'll read you the status as it harvests. So if I click start, you can see harvesting without a proxy. But normally it would tell you the proxy there next to it, and it's going to tell you, you'll be able to see it rotating through proxies and that sort of thing. And then eventually it will die if it runs out of proxies. So slowing it down for public proxies or private proxies is important, and with public proxies I need to find the sweet spot as well, get as much as I can without banning them instantaneously. Now, as far as other types of proxies go, we can load in private proxies here. Obviously in the harvester we can put in the detailed harvester drop down using server proxies, which come from Scrapebox. Those are obviously heavily used. Again, there is Google Pass proxies in there, but they're heavily used, so I wouldn't stake a lot on being able to use those to scrape Google. And then we can auto load proxies from file, and I'm not going to really cover that. The custom harvester has the same thing. It also has more options as far as loading a file every X minutes and that sort of thing. But I have other videos on harvesting, which I can link to again in the description, that covers all this sort of stuff. So types of proxies are pretty basic. And how I can load them in there and use them. The concept of being able to scrape is the same. Now, other Google services have similar concepts. So if I want to check index, for instance, for Google index checking, it uses the info operator, at least at the time of this video, because that's the most accurate way to do it. So that's an advanced operator. So I want to do like one connection for every like 80 or maybe even 100 proxies, because Google likes to ban that one pretty fast. So I'd load in 100 private proxies and do that. If I don't have that many proxies, again, there's a delay option here in the index checker. That and scraping Google are probably the most that I hear, but you have to bear in mind that if I use the Google Image Grabber, that obviously is a Google service, the Google Competition Finder, the Google Cache Extractor, the Google Mobile Site Tester add-on is a Google service. So all of these things use Google, and they all have their own IP bans. The same concept applies for every other engine that you have in here. So if I'm going to do Yahoo or Bing, last I checked, which I don't use Yahoo a lot, so I don't really dialed this in, Yahoo banned pretty quick like Google, maybe even faster. Bing seems to ban slower. Some of them have different things, like, for instance, Deeper Web seems to ban slower than Google, but it's Google powered. I don't think you quite get 1,000 results for every search, but you could use that. Anyways, all of these different engines are going to work differently. So you're going to have to test if you want to use a particular engine like YouTube videos or TalkTalk.com or Rambler, whatever, then you're going to have to use the same concept. Basically, if you have no idea, pick a conservative setting, just like you would do with Google, and start scraping. If you get banned, then you need to either go with less connections, or if you get down to one connection, you may need to use the detailed harvester and add a delay and keep increasing the delay until you're able to harvest and you're good. If everything's great when you pick your number of connections, maybe you can try more connections or a lower delay, and then basically you'll find the sweet spot, because you can watch it in the detailed harvester or in the custom harvester, watch that error column, and you'll be humming along and everything's great, and all of a sudden it just starts getting blocked and you'll be able to see it. So just find that sweet spot that works. It'll same thing for all the engines. At some level, if you go slow enough, they're not going to block you, and you just need to find that spot. Now, if you do get blocked, most engines will unblock the IP after a certain amount of time. I haven't tracked all these engines, but I can tell you with Google, stereotypically, it is 12 to 48 hours. So, depends. If you have a good IP or one that's not been blocked a lot before, like your home IP, for instance, it's probably going to get unbanned within 12 hours. If you are using proxies that you've banned 1,000 times and the people before you banned them 1,000 times, it might take 48 hours before they get unblocked. So basically you can sort that out and you can test, but in the meantime, if you keep hammering away on them, they're going to continue to get blocked and stay blocked. So just wait the timeline and see if they're unblocked. Now with Google, I can tell you that if you go 48 hours, much more than that, like say you go 3, 4, 5 days and they're still blocked, then they're probably permanently blocked. Now it's not most likely that you're going to get proxies and they're going to be permanently blocked by Google, but Google has started in the past year perma-banning like entire IP ranges. So I've talked to people in certain countries or on certain internet providers where they just have taken that entire IP block or that whole internet provider and just blocked the entire thing out the gate, so you can't Google scrape at all. In that case, then you're just going to need proxies or something else. You could use a VPN, for instance. You're just changing the IP constantly. Whatever it is that gets you a new IP, you can use. And there are private proxies and back connect proxies. And back connect proxies, I have a video on that. They come and go. They change the IP on the back end, and sometimes those work okay, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they work good for a while and they stop. It just depends on the service and the proxies they're using. Once a service becomes saturated, usually it's hard to find really great back connect proxies that work really well, at least at this time. I have seen some that are awesome and then some that are just not awesome, but I don't know of any awesome providers at the moment. A couple other things I would say is if you're really struggling and you just can't find it, like if you're trying to pick some connections in a delay and you keep getting blocked and have to wait 12 hours or 24 hours to get unbanned, that sort of thing, just go radical and pick a super high delay. Put in like 60 seconds or 90 seconds and then just set it up and let it go overnight. You'll come back in the morning, even only one query every 90 seconds, and not realize that you can get thousands or tens of thousands of URLs overnight while you're sleeping, even with a pretty high delay. Now it varies based on your query, but whatever. So if you're really struggling, just do something like that to get started and get some results, and then dial it back little by little, and you'll find your sweet spot. Another thing I can say is there are a lot of engines here. Now, Google is great. I use Google all the time. A lot of people use Google. But bear in mind, they aren't the only option out there. Yahoo and Bing are obviously very big. Google API and Deeper Web and stuff like that use Google anyways. And there's all these other engines to get results from. So try some other engines and see if you can get some results, because a lot of times your IPs that might be blocked by Google aren't blocked by other engines, and you can use all those and get a load of results and get going rather than sitting still, spinning your wheels for days and days and days where you're trying to get started and figure this out, or we're dealing with new proxies or whatever. The last thing I want to say is that Google specifically, and I talk a lot about Google because they're the biggest, and that's where I get a lot of questions from, is different in a browser with JavaScript on versus JavaScript off. Scrapebox uses sockets and threads for various functions in Scrapebox, and that way it can be multi-threaded, which makes it fast and allows you to run tons of connections to do things and that sort of thing. And that creates raw sockets and threads so that you can avoid things like using any proxies that might be stuck into your system, like an Internet Explorer, that sort of thing. It just bypasses all of that, which is all great. But those things don't support JavaScript, so Scrapebox has to use the no JavaScript version of all these search engines. Now, the search engines, such as Google, does see Scrapebox as a browser, so it can't really tell the difference between Scrapebox or Firefox or that sort of thing. But if you have an IP that's blocked, a lot of people will be like, my IP's not blocked because I can test it in a browser. Well, that's great, put it in a browser, but the JavaScript in a browser a lot of times allows Google to see what your real IP is anyways, and they have a lot more control with JavaScript, so they might have an IP that's banned for no JavaScript for even a basic query, but can do advanced operators with JavaScript running. Now, you can definitely ban an IP with JavaScript running in a browser. Just pick you out a real fancy, high-end, lots of advanced operator query and start running it a ton of times really fast, and you'll get your IP banned. However, that's not an accurate test. If you want an accurate test, go in your browser, turn JavaScript off, put your proxy in there. Firefox is great. It's what I use because it has its own proxy set up. Internet Explorer, you got to go through the system proxy, and then if you don't take it out, everything in Windows is trying to use that. And so do whatever you want to do, but the point is turn JavaScript off in your browser, put the proxy in there, then try to load Google, and then you're going to get an accurate test. Another thing you can do, which again isn't beyond the scope of this video, is to build a custom test. So if you're testing your proxies in Google, you can actually go into managing them and the configuration here, and build a custom test so that you're looking for a particular URL and you just pick a particular Google URL. So go to your browser and type in your query and then grab that URL and then put it in a string to find. And what that does is then I can take a Google test, and rather than searching for a basic keyword, I can search for a date range search, or I can search for my query that has advanced operators. And that's really handy because then you get an accurate result back for proxies that pass for your particular query type. However, I would recommend don't rapid fire test these things, because if you stick in a advanced query here for something with a date range and in URL operator and then site operator, that's a query to that IP from Google. And if you test those things like 30 times rapid fire, you're going to block them all just in testing, which is why Scrapebox doesn't use that kind of test in the first place. It's just a basic keyword Google test. So those are some things that you can do, and how Scrapebox works, and getting an idea and an understanding that basically go slow enough and you'll be good to go. You'll be amazed at how many thousands and hundreds of thousands of results you can get with private proxies, even with big delays. I still use private proxies in a delay because I have lots of different servers and lots of proxies, and so I just load them all up and let them go, and I'm still able to scrape massive results. And if you need to have millions and millions of results scraped every single day, then getting 50 private proxies is probably not the right thing for you. You need to spend some more money and buy a lot of proxies, or get some serious public proxies going. But for most people, if you get an accurate query and dial it in, that's going to be better for you. And I got videos on how to make footprints than it is to trying to scrape a lot more and then filter it down. So basically, go slow enough and find that sweet spot that works for other engines. Don't forget about other engines. Understand how Google works and test and see what kind of IPs and your budget and that sort of thing. It's hassle versus time and budget is really what it boils down to. So if you need to go faster, you might need to spend more money or spend more time investing in scraping public proxies and finding your own sources. There's always a way to make it work, and if it doesn't work, it's probably not Scrapebox that's broken. It's probably that you're not setting it up right or using the right kind of proxies. And you can always, one other thing to do is always go to a Harvester engine configuration, import, and download the default engines, because maybe your Google engine is out of date. Google changed something and broke the old engine file, and then Scrapebox fixed it, but they don't force that update on you because you can customize these things. So maybe do that to troubleshoot, to make sure that you have the latest engine file. And if you've done that, then you're probably just going too fast and you need to slow it down and add a delay, or try another engine, or all of the above. And that is how to safely scrape Google and other engines using either public proxies or private proxies and get all the results that you need. Thanks for watching this Scrapebox video. For more Scrapebox videos, click the subscribe button on your screen or click the subscribe button down below.